The story begins with a con artist named Makoto Edamura who successfully tricks a woman into buying an expensive water filtration system she really didn't need with the help of his partner Kyudo. Shortly afterwards, the two try to con the French con man Laurent Thierry, but ends up getting conned by him instead. With the law enforcement in pursuit, Edamura runs away and spots Laurent in a taxi. He hitches a ride with Laurent to Haneda Airport and then catches a flight to Los Angeles. Laurent takes Edamura to Beverly Hills to meet up with a famed movie producer and secret drug kingpin Eddie Cassano at his Beverly Hills mansion, and is introduced to Laurent's partner Abigail Abby Jones. Abby, pretending to be a wannabe actress and hanger-on of Cassano's, is fed a drug in the form of a Japanese-style hard candy called Sakura Magic, and feigns a drug-induced trance in order to convince Cassano to buy it from Laurent. Edamura then realizes that being brought to help with this con was Laurent's scheme the whole time, and that both Kyudo and the woman he conned earlier were in on it. Not pleased with the way Laurent has been using him, Edamura tries to run away but is captured due to the tracking device that Laurent secretly placed on him. He is knocked unconscious by Abigail and regains consciousness only to find himself hanging from the Hollywood sign. Edamura recalls the events that led him to becoming a con man. Struggling to find work due to his father's criminal past, he got a job as a salesman for Kyudo's company to support his ailing mother Miki Edamura, only to find that the company has been engaging in consumer fraud without his knowledge. The police did not believe that he didn't know about the scam, and Edamura was sent to prison. After being released on parole, Edamura's criminal record prevented him from getting a new job and his mother passed away. With no other way to make a living, Edamura approaches Kyudo offering to partner with him and become Japan's greatest con man. In the present, after Laurent and Abigail cut Edamura down from the Hollywood sign, Laurent explains his intention to scout him with the help of an associate, and that Sakura Magic is fake and he is using its rumored existence to scam Cassano. That night, Laurent meets with Cassano and makes a deal to sell a huge batch of Sakura Magic to him. Not pleased with his role in this scheme, Edamura walks out and reflects while holding a gashapon figure of Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who he considers to be the greatest con man in history after being harshly criticized by Abby. 2 days later, Edamura greets Laurent and Abby at Cassano's mansion with a renewed sense of confidence. After walking out, Edamura rented and watched Razzie Rising, a movie directed by Cassano. The next morning, he was prepared to return to Japan, but at the airport he was captured by Salazar, a former gang boss now in Cassano's employ. With Edamura forced to stay until the deal is complete, he decided to pretend that he created Sakura Magic, offering to sell Cassano a fake formula for the drug for a much higher price. After Laurent and Abby arrive, Cassano asks for proof of Edamura's credentials, which they fake by having Kyudo's company act as doctors at the pharmaceutical research center where Laurent claimed that Edamura worked. That night, Cassano discusses an alternative location for the deal, knowing that LAPD Detective Anderson has been hot on his trail. On the way there, a car chase between Cassano's car, which is driven by Salazar, and Anderson ensues, but they manage to shake Anderson off. Cassano reveals that he is bribing Anderson and the chase was staged to keep the LAPD from becoming suspicious. Everybody arrives at the trade location, which is an abandoned cider brewery now used to prepare drugs. Cassano orders Edamura to make Sakura Magic himself, and when Edamura claims that conditions are not ideal for making the drug, Cassano offers to renovate it. Cassano sends Edamura to stay at Salazar's house until the new lab is complete, separating him from Laurent and Abby. FBI agent Paula Dickens arrives and assumes command of Anderson's unit in order to apprehend both Cassano's drug network and Laurent's gang. Edamura has a dream of his childhood where he looked up to his father, lawyer Seiji Ozaki. With Edamura under Salazar's watch at all times and a week remaining until the lab is ready, Abby sneaks in at night so Edamura can take lessons from Laurent and a drug cook through video conferencing so that he can construct a plausible fake version of Sakura Magic to fool Cassano. The next day, Edamura goes sightseeing with Salazar, visiting Grauman's Chinese theater and attending a baseball game at Dodger Stadium, and finds out that Salazar has a son named Tom who lives in foster care after the death of Salazar's wife, who he is missing a visit with because of Cassano's command that he entertain Edamura. At Edamura's behest, they pick Tom up and take him to a theme park so he can spend the day with his father. While using the restroom, Edamura is approached by Paula and Anderson. Paula tells him that she is well aware of the scheme and coerces him into acting as a mole to aid an FBI sting operation to arrest Laurent and Cassano, in exchange for which they will clear Edamura of wrongdoing and return him to Japan. Edamura discovers a hidden camera in his bedroom at Salazar's home, meaning his contact with Abby and Laurent has been found out. The next day everybody convenes at Cassano's mansion for a party, unaware that there is a traitor among them. But to Edamura's relief, Cassano accuses his financial manager. Edamura confronts Salazar about the camera and asks him why he didn't expose him to Cassano. And Salazar explains that he became a gang lord and later Cassano's bodyguard out of a desire to rise above his poor upbringing and give his son a better life. This reminds Edamura of his own father's arrest on suspicion of aiding a human trafficking ring, prompting him to agree to cooperate with Paula and the FBI on the condition that they let Salazar go free. With the laboratory ready, Edamura goes through the motions of making Secura magic while wearing the glasses with the FBI bug, despite Paula's earlier refusal to absolve Salazar of blame. Upon completion, a SWAT team commanded by Paula breaks into the laboratory. Abby steals a gun and aims at an officer but is shot down along with Laurent when he tries to protect her. Distraught, Edamura attacks Paula and holds her at gunpoint, threatening to shoot her if the FBI and LAPD don't open a path out for him and Salazar. Meanwhile, in the confusion, Cassano blows up the lab. Cassano attempts to escape, but Edamura chases after him, forcing Cassano to viciously beat him up before Salazar arrives and saves Edamura by punching him out. The three are taken to the FBI's surveillance trailer, but rather than arrest Cassano, Paula agrees to free him and destroy evidence of his involvement for a bribe of $100 million. Edamura is furious but is knocked unconscious by an unseen assailant. Later, Edamura awakens on an island where Laurent and Abby greet him, and Paula reveals her true identity as Cynthia Moore, another member of Laurent's gang. At Cynthia's villa, Laurent's gang celebrates the success of their scam and Cassano's downfall, while Laurent explains that everything was staged as the FBI officers were all part of his crew, and their weapons were just props. He and Abby fake their deaths to convince the LAPD to overlook them and focus only on Cassano. He also tells Edamura that Salazar has given up on being a gangster to focus on being a father, aided by a reward from the FBI he obtained for turning Cassano in. After the party, Edamura returns to Japan to turn himself in and use his share of the profits to compensate the victims he helped Q to scam. Cassano is now completely arrested and interrogated by the real Paula Dickens. Edamura spends the next 2 years in prison training as a mechanic. On his release, he begins his new life working as a car mechanic at Nakanoshima Heavy Industries. The owner, Shogo Nakanoshima, shows Edamura his propeller airplane and teaches him how to maintain it. Meanwhile, Danny, an arrogant manager, fires Chris, an employee he had harassed. Danny flies to Las Vegas where he meets Cynthia, who asks him to place bets for her on Abby at an underground boxing club with fixed matches. However, it is a scam and Danny loses all his money when Abby throws a match, and Cynthia later delivers his money to Chris. Sometime later, Laurent's gang approaches Edamura and reveals they have formed an air racing team as part of their next con and had him trained as a mechanic for that purpose. Edamura grudgingly joins them, and Abby takes Edamura on a test flight in the plane he worked on. The plane explodes in midair due to the effects of a chemical capsule Laurent had planted in the oil tank, but they parachute to safety. In Singapore, Laurent explains to Edamura that the targets of his scam are the brothers Clark and Sam Ibrahim, who fled their Middle Eastern country amidst scandal and now run the Pathfinder air race. Sam is the promoter who is rigging the tournament by paying off competitors to lose to his pilot brother Clark. He is also sabotaging the planes of other pilots who do not cooperate, such as Lewis Muller, who crashed and was badly injured in the Australian race. Abby is the pilot for Cynthia's Team Confidence, and she qualifies but nearly passes out after spotting a couple who resemble her parents in the crowd. That night, Cynthia convinces Sam to rig the tournament final to have Abby race Clark after Edamura uses Spam's social media to popularize the first female pilot and owner team in the event's history. The next day, Abby has her first match against Toto Viley, who is supposed to lose, but as she falls behind, she hears Sam's voice through a hidden microphone denigrating women. Abby's memories of the loss of her parents and her time as a child soldier affect her performance, but Edamura's yelling in her earpiece brings her back to the race in time for her to beat Viley. Edamura takes Abby for a ride on the Singapore Flyer and tries to get to know her better, but she refuses to acknowledge him as a partner while Laurent's gang sets up an underground casino at the Marina Bay Sands. Cynthia tries to seduce Sam again but is rebuffed, so Laurent enacts his backup plan to have Edamura infiltrate Clark's maintenance crew. Laurent convinces Lewis's wife Isabel to vouch for Edamura as a mechanic after Clark's mechanic Kevin leaves the team after being told that his London home caught fire. The next day, Edamura offers to join Clark's mechanic team, claiming he can improve his plane's performance. Sam is skeptical and puts him to the test, but a group of planted onlookers praise Clark's improved flying. Later, Siwon appears posing as Lewis's former patron, and she tells Sam that Edamura was in on a scheme involving an underground casino and was the one responsible for Lewis's accident. Sam is keen to visit the underground casino, so Edamura takes Sam, who assumes the false identity of a Turkish restaurant owner called Mike Portnoy. Sam places a bet of $300,000 on Abby at Lawrence Casino and she wins. That night Abby researches information about Lewis online and recalls the day she won the medal in a ballet recital, only to be caught in the bombing of Baghdad as she and her parents walked home. The next day Sam bets $1 million on Abby and wins, but Laurent bans him from the casino for gambling under a false identity. So Edamura proposes that he place bets on Sam's behalf. Sam agrees and instructs Edamura to bet $2.5 million on KO by Sconti. However, before the race, Cynthia visits KO's hangar and distracts him and his crew, while Abby secretly drops a tiny capsule into his plane's fuel tank. The capsule dissolves and releases chemicals which cause the plane's engine to malfunction, forcing KO to make an emergency water landing and Sam to lose his money. That night Abby takes Lewis to the gardens by the bay, where she demands to know whether or not he was part of the 2003 bombing of Baghdad, while secretly holding a knife in her hand. Lewis admits that he bombed Baghdad and Abby attacks him, but Edamura intervenes and stops her. On the night before the finals between Abby and Clark, Edamura suggests that Sam apologize in person to Laurent in an effort to recover the money he lost on the last race. Sam is allowed back into the casino and bets everything he has on Clark. That night Edamura visits Clark to convince him to race for real, and Clark reveals that he and Lewis agreed to genuinely race each other in Australia, defying Sam's orders, and he blames himself for Lewis's injuries. On the day of the finals, Edamura and Abby arrange for Lewis to pilot Abby's plane in the race against Clark. Clark realizes from the other plane's maneuvers that he is racing Lewis, and he just edges out Lewis to win the tournament. However, Sam is fooled into believing that Abby won by seeing doctored footage in the casino showing Abby's plane winning. After Sam finds out that he was duped into losing all his money, he returns to the casino only to discover that it has gone. Edamura is living in Nice, working at a Japanese restaurant which is run by a Chinese chef who thinks that Edamura is Korean. Edamura argues with the chef over the way he makes sushi, which is even criticized by a fussy wealthy customer. Later, Edamura, Laurent and Cynthia dine at Edamura's boarding house restaurant, and Cynthia notices a painting which resembles work by the legendary Spanish painter Sergio Montoya. The owner Sebastian and his daughter Marie inform Edamura that their business is in debt and will close soon, so Edamura offers to buy the painting for $20,000. Edamura arranges for Cynthia and Abby to display the painting in a gallery and sell it to the fussy customer from before, while Kudo distracts the staff. When Cynthia recognizes that the client is James Coleman, the world-renowned art appraiser, she tells Edamura to abort the operation. However, James has already purchased the painting for $25,000. Edamura gives the money to Sebastian and Marie, but when Sebastian turns on the TV, a news report reveals that the painting is actually an authentic work by Montoya called Snow of London, valued at $20 million. Later, after consuming too much wine, Cynthia decides to steal the painting back from Coleman. The operation begins with Laurent's gang attending an art auction in London where James is the auctioneer. Later, they set up listening devices at the estate of Farrah Brown, who is James's business partner and lover. She is the wealthy CEO of a fashion company, and they learn that James has convinced her to buy any painting he desires without question. Meanwhile, Cynthia recalls the time when she first met Thomas Mayer, an aspiring artist who admired Montoya. She became his model and they later fell in love. At the next auction, Snow of London painting goes up for bidding and Laurent buys it for $30 million. After Farrah's concerned butler stops her from bidding any higher. Angered by Farrah's inability to buy the painting, James hires Abby, who had been seeking to work for him as an assistant. Cynthia explains that the next step is to have a replica of the Snow of London painted by Thomas, who had talent for copying famous paintings, and then sell the forgery to Farrah. Edamura finds Thomas and learns that he has a $2 million debt. Cynthia recalls the time when Thomas was discovered by James, who hired him to make replicas of lost famous paintings, which James could sell as being authentic. This practice earned James the nickname Seven of the art world as a tracker of lost artworks. James's scheme provided Thomas with a new studio and a well-paying job, but it ended the romantic relationship between the two young lovers. Edamura arranges for Thomas to meet Cynthia at the restaurant where the two last met years earlier, and she asks Thomas to make a forgery of the Snow of London in exchange for paying off his debts. Meanwhile, Abby tells James that Laurent is an underground art dealer who sources paintings for the mafia and convinces him to attend a private event where the Snow of London is being auctioned. Later, Edamura discovers that Thomas got into debt by borrowing money to buy back his forgeries to keep them out of the public eye. The next day, Edamura presents Thomas with the real Snow of London and asks him to create a forgery. Thomas agrees and completes the copy several days later. With the Snow of London replica finished, Cynthia pays off Thomas's debt. Meanwhile, Farrah arranges for her butler Tim to sell many of her assets to raise $50 million to buy the painting. The private auction begins the next day, stacked with Lawrence associates. During a break, Abby and Tim take Farah aside and convince her of James's true exploitative nature. The auction resumes with the Snow of London up for bidding, and Abby informs James that Farah is feeling ill but will pay up to 70 million. Cynthia sits in Farah's seat and aggressively bids against James, forcing him to buy the painting with 100 million of his own money. Later, Farah cuts her ties with James, and on Tim's advice she opens a public exhibition to display the paintings she bought at James's request. Lawrence's gang returns to Nice to return the painting, but Marie realizes that it is not the original. Edamura apologizes for giving James the real painting, but Marie says she prefers the replica because of the effort that went into it. Cynthia returns to London and has one last meeting with Thomas, while Edamura returns to the restaurant hoping to get his job back, only to find out the owner has now hired Thai staff. On the anniversary of his mother Mickey's death, Edamura visits her grave and reflects on his adventures with Lawrence's gang. Later at Cynthia's villa, Edamura tells Laurent and his gang that he is quitting them. He returns to Japan to restart his life and finds a job working for the Scarlet Trading Company. After carrying out some international transporting jobs, Edamura's boss Ishigami takes him to Roppongi to meet Akemi Suzaku, CEO of their parent company, the Suzaku Group, and she gives him her approval. Edamura travels to Vietnam with Ishigami and finds himself taking part in a human trafficking operation. They take some orphan children from a farming village and auction them, much to Edamura's disgust. Suspecting that he was set up by Laurent again, an angry Edamura calls Laurent, who confirms that he knew about the Scarlet Company and the mafia known as the Suzaku Group, which makes their money from human trafficking. Laurent and Abby travel to the United Arab Emirates to meet Clark Ibrahim, who has cut ties with his brother and offers to sponsor his flying team in exchange for participating in the gang's next confidence operation. At the Suzaku holding facility, Edamura is tasked with cooking meals for the smuggled children. Cynthia and C1 travel to Japan and present themselves to Ishigami as representatives of a trading company claiming that they can deliver an Arab princess. Ishigami agrees, and the four travel to the UAE, where Lawrence's gang performs a scripted kidnapping, with Clark posing as the prince and Abby posing as the princess. They return to Japan to present Abby to Akemi, and after asking Abby to strip, Akemi offers 100 million. Cynthia rejects the offer and threatens to sell her in Shanghai to force Akemi to raise her offer to 1 billion. That night, Edamura is greeted by Laurent at his home, telling him that the operation is over as soon as he helps Abby escape. Edamura frees Abby using a duplicate key, but he decides to also release the 10 children being held there. However, the children refuse to leave because they have no place to go or return to. With the security guard returning, Laurent aborts the operation and Abby returns to her confinement room. Edamura recalls the time in his childhood when his mother taught him Confucianism, and his father Ozaki was jailed for aiding the Suzaku Group with human trafficking. He never returned home after his release from prison, and Edamura cared for his mother until she died. Back in the present, Edamura is summoned by Akemi and ordered to serve as an interpreter for the visitors from Shanghai Longhubang, a Chinese mafia group led by Liu Xiao, which started as a subsidiary of Suzaku Group. The visitors are Chen Yao, Liu's right-hand man, and Oz, who does the interpreting instead of Edamura. Chen is angered when Akemi makes outrageous demands and leaves frustrated. Edamura then asks Ishigami about the interpreter, and he finds out that Oz is actually his father. Edamura finds Laurent and punches him, angry that he set him up to see Ozaki against his wishes. Edamura then tracks Ozaki to his hotel room to confront him about leaving his family, and he apologizes. Edamura convinces him to help free Abby and the smuggled children. At the appointed time, Edamura and Ozaki free Abby and the children into a van driven by Cynthia. Following Ozaki's suggestion to leave the highway, they are cornered by Ishigami's group. Ozaki reveals that he tipped off Ishigami about Edamura's escape plan, and he still works for the Suzaku Group. Edamura, Abby, and Cynthia are held captive on Akemi's private yacht in Sagami Bay. Edamura is asked to prove his loyalty by shooting Abby and Cynthia, but Ozaki shoots them instead and they fall overboard. Akemi then allows Edamura to take the gun and shoot Ozaki, who also falls overboard. For the next 3 days, Edamura refuses to eat until Akemi shows him kindness, and he realizes that she is the only person left he can turn to. 2 months later, Akemi asks Edamura to run an auction of trafficked children because of his previous experience. Edamura successfully runs the auction, resulting in a huge increase in revenue, and Akemi makes him the permanent auctioneer. Later, Ishigami tells Edamura that he must protect Akemi from the Shanghai Mafia. Meanwhile, in Shanghai, Liu tells Chen the importance of a translator and how they are vulnerable with Ozaki gone, just as Laurent arrives seeking an audience with Liu. Edamura returns home and is surprised to see Ozaki still alive. Ozaki then tells his story of Laurent, starting from his childhood being raised in Brussels by his dyslexic mother Emma Thierry, who was cheated out of her life savings by a shady investor named Hugo. Shortly thereafter, Emma passed away, leading Laurent to live a life of gambling in Paris. One night he tried to kill Hugo, but he accidentally stabbed a woman named Dorothy instead. Following Dorothy's stabbing, Laurent fled and was picked up by C1, who took him to see Dorothy, who had survived, and revealed that it was part of their scam. She revealed that she, C1, and Ozaki were con artists and Hugo was their target. Laurent was offered a place in the team because of his gambling and multilingual skills, and together they carried out successful confidence scams in places like Sao Paulo, Milan, and Sydney. Laurent fell in love with Dorothy and took her to Finland to see the Northern Lights, where they became engaged. The gang decides to disband after one last confidence trick targeting the human trafficking organization Shanghai Longhubang, run by Liu Xiao. Laurent won Liu's trust by beating him in mahjong, and he was hired to be Liu's interpreter. Laurent introduced Liu to C1, who told him about a valuable princess of the former Ethiopian Empire that fled the civil unrest and was now living in Kyoto as a college student, who was played by Dorothy. The next part of Ozaki's scheme involved C1 showing pictures of Dorothy to Liu, passing her off as a princess of the Ethiopian dynasty. He agreed to buy her for 10 million after C1 threatened to sell her to Acme instead. The gang then kidnapped Dorothy in Kyoto and took her to Liu, planning to break her out the next day. However, Laurent learned that the real descendants of the Ethiopian dynasty were coming to Shanghai, which threatened the operation if Liu realized that Dorothy was not the princess. Laurent told Ozaki and C1 to flee, and he frantically rushed to save Dorothy. However, Chen took her onto Liu's private yacht, where Ozaki told Liu the location of the money, but Liu had Dorothy shot and killed anyway in front of Laurent. With Dorothy gone, Laurent had only the ring she wore around her neck, and he fell into a deep depression. However, C1 returned to France and rekindled his interest in life. A few years later, Laurent encountered Cynthia in London, who tried to scam him. Impressed by her skills, he decided to form a new gang with Cynthia, C1, and Ozaki. He then recruited Abby in Brooklyn for her fighting abilities. After serving his prison sentence, Ozaki became Liu's new interpreter, while also arranging for his friend Kyudo to coach Edamura in con artist skills. Back in the present, Abby, Cynthia, and Ozaki are revealed to be alive and were not killed on Acme's yacht. Ozaki's gun was loaded with paint bullets, and after they were shot and fell into the water, C1 took them to Laurent's yacht anchored some distance away, although Edamura was unaware of the subterfuge. Liu asks Laurent to become his translator for the upcoming Shanghai Longhubang negotiation with Acme. Meanwhile, Ozaki explains to Edamura that he refused to see him or Mickey in order to protect them from Shanghai Longhubang, but Edamura mistrusted his father's motives. Acme and Liu have their video conference meeting, with Laurent falsely translating to Liu that Acme wants him to transfer 67% of Shanghai Trading's ownership to her, along with 100 billion for compensation, while Edamura falsely tells Acme that Liu mistrusts her and will only sell his company for 100 billion, further fueling tensions between the two groups. In preparing for Liu's visit to Tokyo, Ishigami has a new chair prepared for Acme with a sword hidden in the armrest, while Chen gives Liu a ring with a hidden poisonous needle. At the same time, the rest of Laurent's gang spends a night at a hot springs resort in Hakone, where Ozaki reveals that the plan is to have Acme and Liu kill each other at the upcoming meeting. On the day of the transaction, the meeting is arranged late at night at the Suzaku Group headquarters. Laurent escorts Liu and Chen to meet Acme in her office, accompanied by Ishigami and Edamura. Liu presents a briefcase filled with stock certificates, while Acme presents a check for 100 billion. After prolonged silence by Edamura and Laurent, Laurent's gang, posing as a SWAT team led by Kyudo, storm the office and confiscate the check and briefcase as evidence. During the standoff, Laurent swipes Liu's poison ring and stabs him with it. Acme suspects the raid was staged due to the convenient timing, and when Kyudo tries to arrest Acme, Edamura responds by taking the hidden sword to defend her. Suddenly, Edamura calls in Kasano and his gang and exposes Laurent's gang. Edamura explains that his ploy was to humiliate Laurent for exploiting him and extract revenge on Ozaki for abandoning him and his mother. He threatens Ozaki with the sword, but Ozaki takes it and slashes Edamura, prompting Laurent's gang to start firing. Fearing for their lives, Acme, Ishigami, Liu, and Chen evacuate the office with their assistants. When the gunfire stops, they return to the office to find it abandoned. Acme sees a lever and pulls it, causing the office to lower to the ground floor, where they find out that they were actually in a fake building on a remote island. As they walk away, the replica building collapses. A few days after the fateful Suzaku Group meeting, Acme, Liu, Chen, and Ishigami adjust to life abandoned on the remote island. On the morning of the transaction, Edamura dreamed of the time he gave his mother a gashapon figure of a wizard, and she hoped it meant that she would meet Ozaki again soon. The details of the Far East operation are explained. Edamura drugged Acme and Ishigami, while Laurent did the same with Liu and Chen, enabling them to be unknowingly flown to the island. Laurent's gang created a replica of the headquarters, while Laurent secretly replaced the poison needle inside Liu's ring with an ordinary one. After the targets evacuated the office, the gang wildly fired their guns as a diversion to make their escape with the check and briefcase. Edamura was wearing a bag of fake blood underneath his blazer, which only Laurent noticed. Kasano, Sam, and James are shown to have helped out. The gang parties away, and at sunrise Laurent throws Dorothy's ring into the sea, having avenged her. A few weeks later, Ozaki visits his wife's grave for the first time, while C1 advises Kyudo to forget about his daughter, who is in his ex-wife's custody. Cynthia raises one of the smuggled children named Kewin and helps him decide on his future, while Abby goes rock climbing at Red Rock Canyon to take a selfie, which she sends to Edamura. Meanwhile, Laurent prepares to con his next target, who happens to be the newly elected President of the United States. In the epilogue, Dorothy is revealed to be alive, living with amnesia on an island near Taiwan under the name Xiangxiang. Her caretakers find the ring inside the stomach of a fish they caught, and Dorothy puts it on her finger. And this brings the anime to an end. I will be uploading more similar recaps, so turn on notifications so you don't miss out on another video. Until next time, farewell.